The train station here in Thessaloniki certainly has been modernized since the 1930s and 40s, when this was the central hub for the train system going up into Eastern Europe. This, unfortunately, was the place where the Jews of Greece and of North Macedonia were sent to eventually catch the line to take them into Poland and other countries where death camps of the Nazis were located.
Unfortunately, there is very little remaining of the Jewish community in Thessaloniki. Before World War II, it is estimated that half the population of the city were Jews. Today, even though 80 years have passed since the Holocaust, there remains only about 1,500. Few of the Jewish-built structures and buildings remain, and the once huge Jewish cemetery was destroyed by municipal leaders in cooperation with the Nazis to make room for expansion of the city eastward. Tombstones and crypts were demolished, and their remnants were used to build walls, roads, and an airport. Some pieces with Hebrew script are still being found in empty lots and parks or landfills.
Tess and I just came out of the Jewish History Museum here in Thessaloniki. A lot of people don't realize it, but some 46,000 Jewish men, women, and children were deported through Thessaloniki from the rail yards here. Also, people from Skopje, the Jewish community from there, was shipped down to Thessaloniki to catch the railways up through the Balkans, taking them to Poland, where they suffered and died in Treblinka and Auschwitz-Birkenau. It's amazing how orchestrated and controlled the whole deportation method was. Just as I saw when I was in Amsterdam, there was a step-by-step progression by which the Jewish people were had their freedoms taken away from them step by step until it finally was to the point where they were shipped out in cattle cars, 80 people to a cattle car that would hold normally 8 cows or 8 horses. Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of people have not quite realized and come to grips with what happened in World War II, because there's still a great deal of anti-Semitism in the world that is showing itself today.
The first century synagogue leaders in Thessalonica did not accept the gospel the Apostle Paul preached. In fact, when they saw the favorable response to the gospel from both Gentiles and Jewish congregants, they stirred up a mob against Paul and his co-workers so that they had to flee to Berea. But the Jews of Thessalonica sent men to Berea to stir them up as well. Perhaps this was also used as a justification for anti-Semitism against the Jews some 2,000 years later.
Where I'm standing right now doesn't seem like all that interesting of a place. I'm just on a street corner in the older section of the town. Behind me you can see a parking garage, and as I continue around, coming into view is the Russian embassy. But the reason I am here is because according to the Jewish Museum, this is the location of the synagogue where the Apostle Paul preached on 3 successive Sabbaths in the 1st century. Wouldn't it be ironic, though, if the synagogue was actually located on the spot where the Russian embassy is today, especially considering all the persecution that came upon the Jewish people in Russia?
The question arises, how did the Christian community respond to the Jewish persecution? But first, we must distinguish between true followers of Christ and those who were considered Christian merely by tradition or ancestry, which was the huge majority in Greece. Historically, throughout Europe, the Jews had been labeled the murderers of Jesus Christ. This was a convenient self-justification for hating Jews and ignoring the fact that we all of us helped nail Jesus to the cross. It was the sins of the world, including our own, for which he died.
I'm standing now at another obscure location within Thessaloniki. It has history, but most people don't know anything about it. This is what used to be called Eleftherios Plaza. Today, it's just a parking lot. But in 1943, this was amongst the center area of the Jewish quarter. And it is an example of how history has forgotten important historic sites. This was the gathering place where the Nazis brought together 9,000 Jewish men to set them off to work camps. There had been a deal between some local companies and the Nazis to do some work which the Nazis wanted to have done. And in exchange, they were able to bring in 9,000 Jewish men to do the labor. If you saw the movie Schindler's List, you remember that's exactly what happened with Schindler. He was able to operate his factory using Jewish people so that he could get the work done for free. Well, it's the same situation here. This was the beginning of the persecutions. The 9,000 men were sent away in June of 1943, and they remained basically in captivity and worked very hard until October of that year. At that time, leaders in the Jewish community that remained were able to pay a levy to the company that had brought together these workers. They called it a levy. We might call it a bribe to get those people, those men, released. It cost the community almost everything they had, all of their wealth, all of their possessions, but they were released for a period of time. Yet, it was shortly after that that they were gathered together once again and sent probably about a mile and a half to the railway stations just off in that direction. And at that point, they were loaded into cattle cars and shipped off to the death camps in Poland.
The Jewish people have always been industrious, and they have prospered in almost any place where they settled and were allowed to establish businesses. Many became wealthy and influential, and this often led to jealousy. Anti-Semitism would often build to the point of violence. So it should not be surprising that this pattern repeated itself in Thessaloniki, among those who were Christian in name only. 2 laws were passed by the Nazis which added to the ambivalence toward Jewish persecutions. The first was a law which made it a punishable crime for anyone to help Jews or to hide any of their valuables for them. In the adage of the carrot and the stick, this was the stick. The second was the establishment of the managing service of Jewish fortunes under the Ministry of Finance. This law allowed Christians to occupy apartments owned by the Jewish population, or to take over their businesses by paying a small amount of money. This was the carrot. 12,000 apartments were transferred under this law, and 2,500 businesses. But now let's consider the response of true believers in Christ who adhered to the 2 greatest commandments: to love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Not many Jews tried to escape their fate. Many believed the lies that they were going to be sent to a pleasant work camp, and those who knew otherwise were often frozen by fear or feelings of hopelessness. But some were clear-eyed enough to see what was coming and fled for their lives. One story of wisdom and bravery concerned Rabbi Moses Pesa, who was ordered by the Nazis to turn over a complete list of every Jew in Volos. He agreed to do so, but said he would need 3 days to compile the list. The Nazis permitted this, but the rabbi used those days to persuade the community to escape to the mountains, where many were able to find refuge with Christian families in small remote villages. In some cases, everyone in the village knew the strangers were Jews, but kept it quiet.
Because the local Orthodox Archbishop Joachim Alexopoulos had issued a letter requesting that the Jews be given protection.
Another instance of mercy among true Christians involved Archbishop Chrysostomos and Mayor Lucas Carrere of Zakynthos, who were ordered to turn over a list of Jews. Again, they warned their Jewish population. The mayor burned evidence of who was Jewish, and Chrysostomos turned over the promised list, but it only contained one name, his own, despite the fact he wasn't Jewish. Both of these men have been recognized by Israel as righteous among the nations.
Thessaloniki was not the only place from which Jews were deported. Here in Athens is a memorial which is represented by a six-pointed Star of David implanted into the ground. And on the face of each of the points is the name of the communities which were sent off to the death camps.
Indeed, one could pass through Thessaloniki and never learn anything about the Jewish tragedy here. But at least there is one memorial site that can be visited if one knows where to look. A sculpture of twisted bodies within flames can be seen at Freedom Square. But this is scant evidence for a city that was once known as the Jerusalem of the Balkans.
Thank you for joining me on this excursion into obscure Christian history. If you haven't done so already, please click the notification bell, smash that like button, and we will see you for the next episode. God bless.